Background of the author: Antonio Pigafetta. Antonio Pigafetta, he was born around 1940 in the town of Vicenza, Venice, Italy. He is Italian scholar and explorer from Republic of Venice. He studied astronomy, geography, and cartography. He became acquainted with the lucrative spice trade and heard the news of the voyage to be undertaken by Ferdinand Magellan.
Also, Antonio Pigafetta, he was admitted as one of the sobrillantes, which is the meaning of a very outstanding person. He was among the 18 survivors who returned to Spain on September 6, 1522, aboard the Victoria with Juan Sebastian Elcano. He died at the age of 39 or 40 around 1531.
Historical background of the document. Father Pedro de Valderrama. Who is Father Pedro de Valderrama? Pedro Valderrama was a Spanish friar and the chaplain of Magellan, who conducted the first Catholic Mass in the Philippines. Magellan ordered the Mass to be celebrated, which took place on 31 March 1521, which is Easter Sunday. Father Pedro de Valderrama was the only priest in Magellan's crew who was given the task of celebrating the first Holy Mass on the shores of Limasaua, an island at the tip of southern Leyte. On Easter Sunday in 1521, Father Pedro de Valderrama celebrated the first Catholic Mass in what is now the Philippines, specifically on the island of Limasaua in southern Leyte. On the morning of 28 March, they saw the island of Limasaua and encountered some natives in canoes whom they befriended and exchanged gifts with. On Sunday, 31 March, Easter Day, Magellan and 50 of his men came ashore to Limasaua. The date was 31 March, and the Spanish priest was part of an expedition to the so-called East Indies, led by the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan.
The Mass was then attended by two Rajas, Magellan, and members of the crew. Among them, Antonio Pigafetta, Jeans de Mafra, and Francisco Albo, who will thereafter write accounts of the first Mass. So, according to Pigafetta's account, Magellan threw much rose muscat water over two kings, largely interpreted as the baptism of two Rajas.
Father Valderrama set up an improvised altar and officiated at the Mass, which was attended by his shipmates and a host of local tribal leaders and inhabitants. On that same Easter Sunday afternoon, Magellan ordered his men to plant a large wooden cross on the top of the hill overlooking the sea. A few days later, the Magellan's expedition moved on to the island of Cebu. On 14 April 1521, Father Valderrama baptized the local tribal leader and around 800 Visayan natives to form the first Catholic community.
Blood Compact. The island's sovereign ruler was Raja Colambu. When Magellan and comrades set foot on the grounds of Mazawa, he befriended the Raja together with his brother Raja Siagu of Butuan. In those days, it was customary among the indigenous and in most of Southeast Asia to seal friendship with a blood compact. On instigation of Magellan, who had heard the Malayan term for it, kasi-kasi, the new friends performed the ritual. This was the first recorded blood compact between Filipino and Spaniards. Gifts were exchanged by the two parties when the celebration had ended.
The content and contextual analysis of the First Mass in the Philippines. March 16, 1521. There was a highland named Samal that was sighted by the Magellan's expedition. which was some 300 leagues westward of the Ladrones Island. March 17, 1521, they landed on an inhabited island or known as Humunu, which Pigafetta referred to as watering place of good signs because of the place is abundant in gold. Humunu lays right of Samal in 10 degrees north latitude. March 25, 1521, they left the island of Hamonhon and changed route towards west-southwest between four islands, namely Shenalo, Hiyonanghan, Ibuson, and Albarien. Afterwards, they sailed westward towards Leyte, then followed the Leyte coast southward, passing between the island of Ibuson on their port side and Hinungningan Bay on their starboard, and then continued southward, returning westward to Mazawa. March 28, 1521. There is an island lies on latitude of 9 and 2/3 towards the Arctic pole and in longitude 162 degrees from the line of demarcation. It is named as Mazawa, which is 25 leagues from the Aquada. April 4, 1521, they left Mazawa bound for Cebu and guided by their king who sailed on his own boat. All throughout their route it took them past 5 islands, namely Ceylon, Bohol, Caninghan, Baybay, and Gatighan. They sailed from Mazawa west by northwest into the Canigao Channel, with Bohol Island to port and Leyte and Canigao Islands to starboard. Then they continue sailing of the Camotes group, namely Poro, Pasihan, and Ponson. From the Camotes Island, they sailed southwestward towards Cebu. April 7, 1521. They entered the harbor of Cebu, or what we call Cebu. It takes them 3 days to negotiate the journey from Mazawa northwards to the Camotes Island and then southward to Cebu. That was the route of Magellan's expedition as stated in the amount of Pigafetta in the route southmost. Point reached before getting to Cebu was Mazawa, located at 9 and 2/3 degrees north latitude.
Contribution and relevance of the document in understanding the grand narrative of the Philippine history. It demonstrates the spread of Christianity, especially Roman Catholicism, throughout the island, which remains as the nation's dominant religion in the country up to present.
Ultimately, the National Historical Institute, led by its chair, Ambit Ocampo, recognized the historical records of Limasawa in Southern Leyte as the venue of the first Mass, held on March 31, 1521. The act declares that the first Mass in the Philippines actually held Limasawa Leyte. Last in the NHCP, or National Historical Commission of the Philippines, agreed that the first Mass happened in Limasawa because Butuan evidences are not sufficient. The other side who claim where the first Mass happened is Butuan. The earliest recorded Mass in the Philippine territory was held in Limasawa on March 31, 1521. It was officiated by Padre Pedro de Valderrama, chieftain of the Magellan Elcano expedition. That the day in the Roman Catholic calendar was Easter Sunday.